My daughter walked into my living room with her husband beside her and said, "Dad, the money's gone." I looked at Emily. "What money?" "The joint account. All of it. We moved the $118,000 into Derek's account." She said it carefully, like she was waiting for me to break. Derek stood behind her with his arms folded. "You weren't using it," he said. "This is better for everyone." I should have shouted. Instead, I looked at the empty space on the mantel where Margaret's photograph used to sit before I moved it into my study. Then I said, "That's interesting." Emily frowned. "What's interesting?" I did not answer. Because 20 months before my wife died, she had placed one very specific instruction on that account. And by emptying it, they had just triggered exactly what she had been waiting for. The phone rang less than an hour after Emily and Derek left. I let it ring twice before answering. Not because I was trying to make a point. Because my hand was shaking badly enough that I needed those 2 rings to steady it. "Mr. Whitaker?" "Yes." "This is Jonathan Price, Vice President of Trust Services at Northstar Trust Bank. I'm sorry to call this late. I need to confirm I'm speaking directly with Thomas Whitaker." "You are." He paused. "I'm calling because a full balance withdrawal was made from the joint account ending in 6138 this afternoon. That account carries a monitoring instruction personally established by your late wife 20 months ago." I sat down at Margaret's desk. Her binder was still open where I had left it. "I need to ask you a few questions," Jonathan continued. "This call is being recorded under our fraud verification procedures." "Go ahead." "Did you authorize the transfer of $118,000 to an external account today?" "No." "Did you make the transfer yourself?" "No." "Do you know who did?" I looked at the framed photograph beside the lamp. Emily at 9 years old, sitting on my shoulders at Lake Tahoe. For 1 second, I almost lied. That instinct surprised me. After everything she had just done, some part of me still wanted to protect my daughter from the consequences of my own answer. Then I looked at Margaret's handwriting inside the binder. My daughter and her husband did it. Another pause. "Emily is an authorized joint signer." "Yes." "And you did not consent?" "No." Jonathan exhaled quietly. "Mr. Whitaker, I've worked in trust services for 23 years. I've made this kind of call more times than I'd like. Your wife left written instructions for this exact circumstance." My throat tightened. "What instructions?" "I'm required to read them to you." I gripped the edge of the desk. "Read them." His voice changed slightly. Softer. "If Thomas is hearing this, then I was right about something I desperately hoped I was wrong about." I stopped breathing for a second. "Jonathan will connect you with Caleb Morgan in the morning. Do not sign anything else. Do not transfer anything else. Do not agree to anything anyone puts in front of you. Breathe. Then call the number he gives you." I closed my eyes. That was when I finally cried. Not over the money. Over the unbearable tenderness of realizing my wife had spent part of her last years preparing to protect me from people she still hoped would never hurt me. Jonathan waited. "Mr. Whitaker?" "I'm here." "Are you all right?" I wiped my face with my sleeve. "Give me Caleb Morgan's number. Here is the part you need to understand before anything that happened over the next 5 weeks makes sense. I was 72 years old. Margaret and I had been married for 45 years. For most of that time, she handled the money. Not because I was incapable, because she was better at it. I had spent 32 years working for the public school district, eventually supervising operations across 6 campuses. Budgets, maintenance schedules, staffing problems, vendor contracts. I could organize a system and tell you exactly where it was failing. But our investments, taxes, insurance, rental income, Margaret handled those the way I handled a broken boiler at 6 in the morning. Competently enough that I never thought I needed to learn every detail. Then she died. And suddenly I was standing inside a financial life I had helped build without knowing where half the doors were. The binder on her desk was thicker than I remembered. The first section listed our normal accounts. Checking. Savings. Retirement. Nothing surprising. The next section did. Whitaker Family Irrevocable Trust. Current funded value. $1.65 million. I read that number 3 times. Under it were records for 3 rental duplexes held through an LLC. I knew we owned rental property. I did not know Margaret had reorganized the ownership structure years earlier. Then I found a life insurance folder. $425,000. Already paid. Already sitting in an account in my name. I had not known that account existed either. For a moment, I felt embarrassed. Then angry at myself for feeling embarrassed. Margaret had never hidden money from me. She had managed it. There was a difference. What bothered me was how thoroughly she had prepared for a future in which I would be alone. Inside the back cover was a business card held in place with a paper clip. Caleb Morgan, Elder Law and Estate Planning ***. Underneath, in Margaret's handwriting. Call him if Jonathan tells you to. Trust him, ***. I barely slept. At 8:57 the next morning, I called. 3 minutes before Caleb's office officially opened. He answered on the second ring. Thomas Whitaker? Yes. He sounded like he had been expecting me. I'm very sorry about Margaret. Jonathan Price gave me your number. I know. That stopped me. You know? Caleb was quiet for half a second. Margaret asked me to be ready if this call ever came. I looked down at the binder. How long ago? Almost 2 years. Something cold moved through my chest. Can you come in at 10? Yes. Before hanging up, he added. And Thomas. What? Bring the binder. And until we talk, don't sign anything for Emily. Nothing. I stared at the phone after the call ended. Because 6 weeks earlier, I already had. Caleb Morgan's office was nothing like I expected. No glass tower. No marble lobby. Just a converted brick house 2 blocks from the courthouse with a brass plaque beside the front door and a receptionist who already knew my name. Caleb was 54, silver beginning at his temples, with the kind of voice that made you feel like nothing needed to happen faster than the truth could support. He shook my hand. Margaret talked about you constantly. That sounds dangerous. He smiled once. She was one of the most careful clients I ever had. He opened the binder and turned to a section I had not reached yet. Your wife first came to me almost 4 years ago. For years. She said something I've never forgotten. Caleb looked directly at me. She said, "I need you to build something that can survive me being wrong about people I love." I felt my stomach tighten. Who was she talking about? She never accused anyone of a crime. That wasn't my question. He paused. Mostly Derek. I leaned back. Why? She didn't trust his financial habits. She thought he was always one emergency away from asking Emily to solve something she didn't fully understand. That sounded exactly like Derek. Every failed idea was temporary. Every debt was almost fixed. Every bad decision just needed one more infusion of money. Caleb tapped the binder. The $118,000 was accessible because Emily was a joint signer. Margaret knew that. So she deliberately left it exposed? I wouldn't call it a trap in the legal sense. What would you call it? An early warning system. He explained that everything else had additional protections. The trust required institutional review. The rental properties could not simply be transferred with one signature. The insurance proceeds were held separately. If someone emptied that account, Caleb said, Margaret wanted North Star to contact you immediately and activate the rest of the safeguards. For the first time since Jonathan called, I understood what my wife had actually done. She had not designed a way to stop every possible betrayal. She had designed a way to make sure the first one did not become the last. Then Caleb asked, "Has Emily had you sign anything since Margaret died?" My mouth went dry. Yes. His expression changed. When? About 6 weeks ago. What was it? She said it was account access paperwork, something temporary so she could help me manage things. Did you read it? I hated the answer. Not carefully. Did you keep a copy? No. Caleb went very still. Thomas, I need you to tell me everything you remember. So I did. Emily at my dining table. A folder. A pen already uncapped. A notary Derek had brought with him. And my daughter saying, "Dad, it's just a formality." Caleb closed the binder. That document may matter more than the $118,000. For days later, Caleb's paralegal called Emily's attorney. Her name was Sophia Bennett, and she had the kind of memory that made me nervous in a useful way. She asked for copies of any documents I had signed concerning financial account access since Margaret's death. Nothing dramatic. Just due diligence. 2 hours later, Emily's attorney's office called back. Not the attorney himself. An associate. Sophia wrote down his exact words. "We're happy to provide the durable power of attorney once you confirm Mr. Whitaker's current accounts. Our client will need updated statements for the transition." Caleb looked up from her notes. Durable power of attorney? I felt my stomach drop. That's not what Emily told me I was signing. It took 11 days and a formal demand before we received a copy. Those 11 days were worse than the first phone call from North Star. I kept replaying that afternoon. Emily sitting across from me. Derek standing near the kitchen. The notary placing little tabs beside signature lines. My daughter saying, "Dad, this just lets me help while you get settled." When the document finally arrived, Caleb read it once. Then again. He turned several pages toward me. "This is effective immediately." What does that mean? It means Emily doesn't have to wait until you're incapacitated to exercise the authority written here. I stared at my own signature. There it was. Real. That somehow made it worse. Caleb pointed to a clause near the bottom. Most of the document used standard language. That clause did not. It authorized Emily to manage and consolidate financial accounts held in my name for purposes of estate administration. In plain English, she could present this as authority to manage accounts beyond the joint one. The trust. Not by simply walking into a bank. Margaret built protections into the trust specifically to prevent that. I exhaled. But this document gives Emily a much stronger position over assets held directly in your name. Brokerage accounts, certain insurance proceeds, banking instructions, potential property transactions. I felt the same tremor return to my hands. Can we stop it? Possibly. Caleb leaned forward. When you signed this, did Emily tell you it was a durable power of attorney? No. Did anyone explain that it became effective immediately? No. Were you given independent legal advice? No. He nodded slowly. Who arranged the notary? Derek. And did the notary ever ask to speak with you alone? I thought about it. No. Caleb closed the document. Then we start there. I looked again at my signature. Nobody had forged it. They had done something that felt almost worse. They had gotten me to sign the truth onto a document by lying about what the document meant. Caleb brought in Nina Patel the following week. She was a forensic accountant and certified fraud examiner with 15 years in the field. The first thing she asked me for was not a bank statement. It was a timeline. Every conversation with Emily and Derek since Margaret died, she said. Dates if you remember them. Approximate times. Exact phrases if anything stuck with you. I must have looked confused. I thought you were here for the money. I am. She opened her laptop. But money moves because somebody needs it to move at a particular moment. I want to know what was happening around every transaction. So I started writing. The funeral. Emily bringing me the folder. Derek asking whether Margaret had left life insurance. The afternoon, Emily became a joint signer. The day the account was emptied. Nina spent the next 9 days building the other half. Public records showed that Derek's restaurant venture had closed 14 months after opening. The business still owed roughly $72,000 on a defaulted loan. There were also 2 smaller civil judgments from private lenders, both filed within the previous 5 months. That explains pressure, Nina said. Not $118,000. Not yet. Additional financial records filled in the rest. Cash advances. Large ATM withdrawals near casinos. Transfers moving between accounts in amounts just small enough to look ordinary if you viewed them separately. Together, they did not look ordinary. Nina turned her screen toward me. I'm being conservative because I don't want to overstate what the records prove. A column on the right showed documented gambling-related activity totaling approximately $46,000 over the previous year. The largest single cluster occurred 4 days before Emily brought me the power of attorney. I stared at the date. You think Derek told her to get me to sign it because of this? I can tell you the timing is significant. She pointed to the next line. The withdrawal from my joint account happened shortly after another creditor began collection activity against him. So the $118,000 was probably not a spontaneous decision. Something clicked into place inside me. Not surprise. Recognition. For weeks, I had been thinking Emily took the money because grief had made me look weak. Now I was starting to understand that weakness was only the opportunity. Derek already had a problem waiting for money. The money had a destination before my daughter ever walked into my living room and told me it was better for everyone. Does Emily know about the gambling? Nina closed the file halfway. I can tell you what the records show, Thomas. That wasn't my question. No. Her voice softened. And I can't tell you what your daughter knows until she tells you herself. I sat there for a long time. Part of me still wanted there to be an explanation that left Emily outside of it. A husband in trouble. A daughter manipulated. A mistake she could still step away from. That was the story I wanted. The numbers were beginning to tell a different one. 10 days after Emily told me the money was gone, I did something Caleb had specifically asked me not to do. I drove to her house. I did not tell him. I did not call first. Some tired, stubborn part of me still believed there had to be a version of this conversation that happened between a father and his daughter without lawyers sitting between them. Emily opened the door wearing workout clothes, phone in one hand. Her face changed when she saw me. Dad, what are you doing here? I want to talk. About what? Just us. She looked over her shoulder before stepping outside and pulling the door mostly closed behind her. That told me Derek was home. I'm not here to fight about the account. The money's gone. I know. Then what? I looked at her. Is Derek in trouble? Something flickered across her face. Small. Fast. But I saw it. Derek's fine. Nina found the restaurant debt. Emily's mouth tightened. And the judgments. Dad. And I know about the casinos. Her hand moved toward the door. Keep your voice down. That was the answer. Not denial. Not surprise. Volume control. I felt something inside me settle into a colder shape. How long have you known? You don't understand what he's been dealing with. Then explain it. He made mistakes. He took $46,000 into casinos. It wasn't all gambling. And the $118,000. Her eyes hardened. You have more than enough. I stared at her. That money was mine. You weren't doing anything with it. There it was again. The same sentence Derek had used. Like my age had somehow turned ownership into waste. I took one step closer. Did you know what that power of attorney actually said when you asked me to sign it? Emily looked toward the neighbor's window. Dad, people can see you. I asked you a question. You need to stop showing up like this. Did you know? Her voice dropped. You're making yourself look unstable. That word landed exactly where she intended it to. I stood there for a second, then nodded. All right. I walked back to my car and called Caleb before I even started the engine. He did not scold me. That made it worse. I understand why you went, he said. But from now on, everything goes through me. Why? Because if they're already using words like unstable, we cannot give them another unsupervised interaction they can reshape later. I looked back at Emily's front door. For the first time, I understood that they were not just defending what they had done. They were preparing a story about why I could no longer be trusted to object to it. Detective Laura Mendoza came to my house the following week. County Elder Financial Abuse Unit. 19 years on the job. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with a legal pad and the expression of someone who had heard every possible version of, "My family would never do that." Caleb had already sent her the disputed power of attorney, Nina's preliminary timeline, and the North Star account records. Laura looked through them once more before speaking. "I want to be very clear with you, Mr. Whitaker. Thomas is fine." "Thomas, then?" She set her pen down. "I see cases like this constantly. Adult children, grandchildren, new spouses. It usually starts when somebody is grieving, sick, isolated, or simply tired enough to sign something they normally would have questioned." I looked toward Margaret's empty chair. And then someone says, "It's just a formality." That phrase made my jaw tighten. Laura noticed. "What makes your situation unusual is that Margaret anticipated the risk. She didn't know they'd do this." "No." Laura shook her head. "She built protection because she knew she might be wrong about people she loved." Exactly what Caleb had told me. "What can you actually do?" "I can open a criminal referral for potential elder financial exploitation. Depending on what we establish regarding the power of attorney and the withdrawal, there may be other issues." "Forgery?" "Possibly. Misrepresentation. Financial exploitation. We follow the evidence." I nodded. "How long?" She gave me the answer I already suspected I would hate. "Criminal investigations move slowly." I looked down at my hands. "So while you investigate, they can keep trying?" Which is why Caleb's civil work matters more immediately. She leaned forward. "Protect the trust. Challenge the power of attorney. Lock down anything they could reach." Then she tapped the folder. "But this matters too." "What does?" "You now have an official case file." I looked at her. "If Emily or her attorney files something claiming you're confused, unstable, or incapable of managing your own affairs, a judge won't be looking at that claim in a vacuum." My stomach tightened. Why would they file something like that? Laura held my eyes for a second. "I don't know that they will." Then she closed the folder. "But people who lose one way to control money sometimes look for another." 9 days later, I learned exactly what she meant. The emergency petition arrived on a Tuesday morning. Caleb called at 7:38. For the first time since I had met him, there was urgency in his voice. "Thomas, Emily filed for temporary conservatorship over your financial affairs." I sat down. "She filed what?" "She's asking the probate court to appoint her to make financial decisions for you while the case is pending." For several seconds, I could not speak. My daughter had taken money from me. When I objected, she had called me unstable. Now she wanted a judge to make that description legally useful. What are they claiming? Caleb read from the filing. Recent bereavement. Significant weight loss. Social isolation. Sleep disturbance. Increasing fixation on financial matters. An unannounced and confrontational episode at Emily's residence. I almost laughed. I lost my wife. I know. I'm supposed to sleep well. I know. And being concerned that $118,000 disappeared now counts as fixation? Thomas. His tone stopped me. This is not about whether the allegations are fair. It's about whether they sound reasonable on paper to a judge who doesn't know you. That frightened me more than I wanted to admit. There was also an affidavit. Linda Parker, Margaret's sister. She wrote that I had looked unusually thin at the funeral and seemed withdrawn and emotionally altered afterward. Linda had never once asked whether I was eating. Never asked whether I was sleeping. But she had signed a statement saying she was concerned about my ability to manage myself. I gripped the phone tighter. If Emily gets this, she could gain court-authorized control over your financial decisions temporarily. The trust. Not automatically, but she could petition for distributions and argue they're necessary for your care. So the power of attorney failed, and now they're trying to use a judge. Yes. When's the hearing? 9 days. I stood and walked into Margaret's study. The binder was still in the bottom drawer. 9 days. 9 days to prove that grief had not erased 45 years of adulthood. That losing weight after burying my wife did not make me incompetent. That showing up at my daughter's house because she had taken my money did not make me dangerous. That I was not a confused old man being protected from himself. I was a father who had finally stopped protecting everyone else from the consequences of what they had done. Caleb spoke again. We're going to get an independent capacity evaluation on the record before the hearing. I looked at Margaret's handwriting inside the binder. All right. This time, the words did not mean surrender. They meant I had 9 days to make the paperwork tell the truth. Caleb scheduled the evaluation for 2 days later. Dr. Hannah Feldman was a geriatric psychiatrist who had been practicing for more than 20 years. Her office was quiet, almost aggressively ordinary. No courtroom feeling. No one watching through glass. Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a yellow legal pad. She looked at me and said, "Mr. Whitaker, I want you to understand something before we start. This is not about whether you are grieving. I am. I know. It would be strange if I wasn't." Exactly. That helped more than I expected. For the next 90 minutes, she tested memory, orientation, attention, problem-solving, judgment, and financial reasoning. Dates. Sequences. Word recall. Simple calculations. Then more complicated questions. What would you do if someone asked you to sign a financial document you did not fully understand? I almost laughed. Apparently, I'd call my lawyer now. She smiled. That's a reasonable answer. I scored 28 out of 30 on the cognitive screening. Dr. Feldman told Caleb later that there was no clinical evidence of cognitive impairment and that my ability to understand financial consequences remained intact. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt angry. "So my daughter takes my money," I told Caleb afterward, "and I'm the one who has to prove I know what day it is." Yes. He did not soften it. That is exactly what is happening. 3 days before the hearing, Nina finished her report. She had reconstructed Derek's financial collapse almost week by week. The restaurant default. The civil judgments. The cash advances. the casino withdrawals. Then the date Emily brought me the power of attorney. 4 days after Derek's largest documented gambling transaction of the year. Then the withdrawal from my joint account. The timeline sat across 6 pages. Dates on the left. Transactions on the right. No adjectives. No accusations. Just sequence. Nina slid the report toward me. People can argue about motives. She tapped the pages. Timing is harder to argue with. I stared at the line connecting Derek's losses to the day Emily put that folder in front of me. For weeks, I had wanted to believe she was protecting her husband. That maybe she had been lied to too. The documents were making that harder. By the time the hearing arrived, Caleb had 4 things ready. Dr. Feldman's capacity evaluation. Nina's financial timeline. The power of attorney. And a sworn statement from the notary Derek had brought into my house. 9 days earlier, Emily had asked a judge to protect me from myself. Now we were going to show the judge exactly who I had needed protection from. The hearing took place in a wood-paneled probate courtroom that smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee. I remember that because when you are scared enough, your brain sometimes records the least important details with perfect clarity. Judge Rebecca Sloan sat above us with steel-gray hair and the patient expression of someone who had watched families turn money into weapons for most of her career. Emily sat across the aisle beside her attorney, Nathan Cole. She wore a pale blue cardigan. Her hair was pulled back. She looked tired, almost fragile. For one dangerous second, she looked like my daughter again. Then Nathan stood. Your Honor, this petition is not punitive. His voice was calm. That made him more effective. He described me as a 72-year-old recent widower living alone in a large house after the death of his wife of 45 years. He talked about my weight loss, my insomnia, my isolation, my increasing preoccupation with financial matters. Then he described the day I went to Emily's house. A concerning, unannounced confrontation, he called it. I stared at the table. He did not technically lie. That was what made it so infuriating. I had lost weight. I was sleeping badly. I was alone. I had shown up without calling. Nathan simply removed every reason those things had happened. Emily Hayes, he continued, is asking the court for temporary authority only so she can protect her father while the underlying family dispute is resolved. Family dispute. There it was. $118,000. A concealed power of attorney. Derek's debts. Reduced to a misunderstanding between relatives. Mrs. Hayes loves her father, Nathan said. Emily pressed a tissue beneath one eye. This is about safety, not control. Caleb did not react. When his turn came, he stood slowly and carried one folder to the lectern. Your Honor, I'd like to begin with Exhibit A. He handed copies to the clerk. An independent capacity evaluation conducted by Dr. Hannah Feldman, a board-certified geriatric psychiatrist. Judge Sloan read silently. Caleb continued. Mr. Whitaker scored 28 out of 30 on standardized cognitive screening. More importantly, Dr. Feldman found no clinical evidence of cognitive impairment and specifically found his financial reasoning, judgment, orientation, and understanding of consequences intact. Nathan stood. No one is claiming Mr. Whitaker has dementia. Caleb looked at him. Then I'm unclear why your petition repeatedly implies he can no longer manage his own financial affairs. Judge Sloan raised one hand. Continue, Mr. Morgan. Exhibit B. Nina's timeline. Caleb explained Derek's failed restaurant, the $72,000 defaulted business loan, the civil judgments, the gambling-related transactions. Then he placed the dates beside each other. Derek's largest documented casino loss cluster. For days later. The power of attorney. Then, the full withdrawal from my joint account. Nathan stood again. Your Honor, Mr. Hayes's personal financial history is not evidence that Thomas Whitaker lacks capacity. No, Caleb said. It is evidence of motive for the people asking this court to take that capacity away from him. That landed. Judge Sloan looked down at the timeline again. Then came Exhibit C. The durable power of attorney. Caleb walked the judge through the clause giving Emily immediate authority to manage and consolidate financial accounts. My client believed he was signing limited account access paperwork while grieving his wife. Nathan shook his head. He signed the document. Yes. Caleb did not argue. He did. Then he picked up another folder. Which brings us to Exhibit D. The sworn statement from Eric Dalton. The notary Derek had brought to my house. Caleb read the relevant portion aloud. Eric admitted Derek had arranged the appointment. That Derek had paid him $60 for what should have been a $20 notarization. That the meeting was rushed. That Emily remained beside me throughout the signing. That no one asked me privately whether I understood the document or was signing voluntarily without pressure. And most importantly, Eric wrote, Mr. Hayes told me Mr. Whitaker already understood everything and that this was only routine account access paperwork. Nathan stood. A notary is not required to provide legal advice. Agreed, Caleb said. He is also not supposed to be used as decoration while one party materially misrepresents the document to the signer. Judge Sloan turned toward Nathan. Does your client dispute the financial timeline regarding Mr. Hayes? Nathan glanced at Emily. We would need additional time to review Ms. Patel's report. You'll have it. Emily looked up. Judge Sloan closed the file. Because I am denying the emergency petition. Emily's face went blank. The judge continued. I have an independent medical evaluation showing Mr. Whitaker is cognitively intact. I have evidence suggesting a significant underlying financial dispute involving the petitioner's household. And I have serious questions regarding how this power of attorney was presented and executed. Nathan started to speak. She stopped him. This court does not appoint conservators simply because an elderly parent is grieving, angry, or inconvenient. Nobody moved. The petition for temporary conservatorship is denied. There was no dramatic gavel slam. No cheering. No one was dragged away. It was quieter than that. A judge looked at the documents and refused to let someone else's version of me become legally true. I made it all the way to the parking garage before my hands started shaking. I sat behind the wheel with the engine off. Then I cried. Not because I had beaten Emily. Because my daughter had forced me into a courtroom to prove I still belonged to myself. And I had. The conservatorship hearing did not end the case. It only stopped Emily from taking control of my finances while the rest of it was being sorted out. 6 weeks later, Caleb filed separately to challenge the durable power of attorney. By then, we had Eric Dalton's sworn statement, Nina's completed financial analysis, my own testimony about how Emily had presented the document, and the record showing that Derek had arranged the notarization. Emily's attorneys did not fight very hard. The power of attorney was formally voided. Nathan Cole withdrew from the conservatorship matter shortly afterward. That same week, Detective Mendoza told me the county had opened a formal investigation focused primarily on Derek. I wish I could tell you he was arrested in some dramatic scene. He wasn't. Real cases move slower and messier than television. Investigators examined the notarization, the circumstances surrounding the power of attorney, the withdrawal from the joint account, and Derek's financial records. The gambling mattered, but only where the money could actually be traced. Months later, the district attorney declined to pursue the most serious felony theories. There were evidentiary problems. Emily had been an authorized signer on the joint account. My signature on the power of attorney was genuine, even though I disputed how I had been induced to sign it. And suspicion is not the same thing as proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Derek eventually accepted a plea tied to his role in facilitating the improper notarization and financial misrepresentations surrounding the document. He also entered a civil consent judgment requiring him to repay approximately $44,000, the portion Nina could connect most directly to gambling-related losses rather than ordinary household spending. He is still paying it back in monthly installments. Caleb's office tracks everyone. Emily was never criminally charged. That was difficult for some relatives to understand. It was difficult for me too. But Caleb explained it simply. Knowing something was wrong is not always the same as proving every element of a crime. She lost access to my accounts. She lost the power of attorney. She lost the conservatorship case. And every major asset Margaret had protected remained protected. The $1.65 million trust stayed behind its institutional safeguards. The rental properties remained untouched. The insurance proceeds stayed under my control. The original $118,000 hurt. I will not pretend it didn't. But Margaret's system had done exactly what she designed it to do. It let the first breach happen loudly enough that the rest of my life could be locked down before anyone reached it. Derek thought he had found an old widower with money. What he had actually found was the warning bell my wife had installed 20 months before she died. The family fallout came slower. At first, most people chose whatever version required the least courage. Linda Parker, Margaret's sister, the same woman whose affidavit had described me as cognitively concerning, called 11 weeks after the hearing. Her voice sounded smaller than usual. "Thomas, I owe you an apology." I said nothing. "I signed that statement because Emily told me you were confused. She said you were forgetting things, that you were obsessing over money." "Did you ever ask me?" "No." That answer mattered more than the apology. Linda took a breath. "I should have." "Yes." "I'm sorry." I believe she meant it. That did not mean everything went back to normal. When she invited me to her book club the following month, I declined. Forgiveness and access were no longer the same thing to me. Emily called twice. The first time, she was furious. "You destroyed my marriage." I almost laughed. "Derek's gambling destroyed your marriage. You brought everyone into it. He brought my money into it. You could have handled this privately." I tried. "You humiliated him." No. My voice stayed level. I stopped hiding what he did. She went quiet. Then she said, "You chose strangers over your own daughter." That one hurt. Because for months I had wondered whether I had. Then I remembered Jonathan, Caleb, Nina, Laura. People who had known me for weeks and still treated me with more honesty than my own child had managed while I was grieving her mother. I chose the people who told me the truth. Emily hung up. I sat there holding the phone for a long time. Not angry. Not relieved. Just finally unwilling to confuse love with permission. Emily called again 4 months after the hearing. This time, she was not angry. She sounded tired. Derek moved out. I sat down at Margaret's desk. "I'm sorry." There was a pause. "I can't make rent next month." I closed my eyes. For 40 years, being her father had trained one reaction into me. Fix it. Send the money. Make sure she was safe. For a second, I almost asked how much. Then I looked at Margaret's binder in the bottom drawer. "How much are you short?" "Dad." I asked how much. "About $2,800. I wrote it down. "Old habits." "Are you asking me for money?" Her voice cracked. I don't know who else to ask. That hurt in a way anger never had. I still loved her. I probably always would. But love no longer meant handing her whatever she requested and hoping this time it would not become another weapon. "I'll consider helping." She exhaled. "Thank you. But not by sending you cash." Silence. "If I help, Caleb reviews it first. Rent goes directly to the landlord. No transfers to you. No access to my accounts. No documents without my attorney." "Dad, seriously?" "Yes. I'm your daughter." "I know." That was exactly why the rules existed. She went quiet. "You don't trust me." I looked at Margaret's handwriting. "No, not right now." Emily inhaled sharply. I continued before I lost the nerve. "That doesn't mean I stopped loving you." She hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there with the phone in my hand. For most of my life, helping family had meant removing consequences. Margaret had taught me something different. Real help could have boundaries. And if Emily ever received anything from me again, it would come through the protections her mother had built for exactly this reason. I still keep Margaret's binder in the bottom drawer of her desk. The leather has softened from how often I opened it during those first months. I do not open it for account numbers anymore. I know those now. I know where the trust is held when the rental statements arrive, who reviews distributions, and exactly which documents require a second signature. At 72, I finally learned the financial life my wife had managed for us for 45 years. But that is not why I keep the binder. I keep it for her letter. Some nights, the house gets so quiet that I can hear the refrigerator cycle on from 2 rooms away. Those are the nights I take the letter out. Margaret had built what everyone later called a trap. An exposed account. A monitoring instruction. A lawyer waiting for a phone call. Layers around everything she could not afford to let someone take from me. For a long time, I thought she had built it to catch Derek. I was wrong. The money was only part of it. What Margaret really built was a way to reach me after she was gone and say, "You are not helpless just because you are grieving." Emily and Derek looked at a 72-year-old widower and saw someone easier to manage. Margaret knew me better. She knew I would shake. She knew I would make mistakes. She knew I might still try to protect our daughter. But she also knew that once someone showed me where the truth was filed, I would follow it. Derek thought he had found a weak point. What he actually found was the last thing my wife ever prepared for me. A way back to myself. And on the nights when I miss her most, that still feels a little like Margaret reaching across the desk and taking my hand.